Hello everyone! I am here on this super sunny warm day to let you know I have just released my newly written Straw Bonnet Workbook. You can find the workbook over in my Etsy shop. It is a 2-file document this time because it turns out one file was too big for Etsy. Don't worry, I will still be making straw hats and straw bonnets, but I just wanted to give you a chance to make your own. So, a little bit of background since I've got your attention. I originally wrote the very first version of my Straw Bonnet Workbook a few years ago. And when I say a few years ago, it's about 2 decades. I wrote it to do some local workshops, and I ended up putting together a few kits for people so they could make their own. And those were around for a little while, and eventually I decided to retire them because I continued to research and really change the techniques that I was using in creating the styles of then the 1850s and 1860s, but then I continued on into other eras as well. So fast forward to a few weeks ago, I was wandering YouTube and discovered a couple videos where someone used my old directions to make their own bonnet. And I was very pleased. It came out so well. And that moment made me pause and go, you know, maybe it's time to revisit the Straw Bonnet Workbook. And so I did. During spring recess, which was just this past week, I spent the entire time making samples, doing new photos, rewriting every bit of the directions, and putting a new workbook together. It turned out to be a 55-page workbook. It's a PDF, split in 2 in order to fit on Etsy. Starts out with an introduction that looks a little bit at history, and then moves into the actual making of the bonnet. The body of the workbook actually shows you how to make not 1, but 2 different styles of bonnets, and I'll get to that in a second. And then it wraps up with a little bit about how to finish off your bonnet, but I didn't go all the way in because I'll get to that. And there's a tiny bit on how to care for your bonnet as well. Now, as I said, there are 2 different sets of directions in the workbook. I decided to do a high brim bonnet and a low brim bonnet. Now the high brim bonnet, you might be familiar with the phrase spoon bonnet, and the low brim bonnet you might refer to as a cottage bonnet. And I just so happened to have the 2 samples right here. And as I brought them out, I realized, oh, they stack well. And then in the camera, I'm like, oh, this really shows the difference in height. So I'm gonna have to bring this back here. This one with the lower brim is the low brim bonnet, or the cottage bonnet. And then here you can see the brim of the high brim bonnet, so you can really see the difference in height there. All right, let's take these apart. So we'll start with that high brim bonnet. There you go. So the directions show you how to hand sew from tip to crown to brim and how to wire it. Following that are directions for the low brim. You'll continue off the same crown, do the full crown, and do the brim. All right. Now you'll notice this is a smaller size. There are directions and basically advice points is how I want to say it, to adjust the size of your bonnet. So if you need a smaller bonnet or a larger bonnet, or maybe you need a little bit deeper crown because you have a lot of hair and have a big coiffure in the back. There's a little guide sheet that tells you how to adapt the number of rows as you build your bonnet. Let's see, what did I want to go over next? Finishing. So I mentioned the section on finishing is short. As I reached that section, I realized the workbook was getting a little long. I also realized if I'm going to write the directions on how to finish the bonnet, I might as well make it available to the people that are buying bonnets from me and need to finish their own. So I decided I'm going to do a second publication on that. And in reality, that's not just the second publication because I have a few additional workbooks in mind. So the plan going forward is to do an additional 1840s workbook, an 1870s capote workbook, and then after that, I don't know if I'm going to go a little earlier and take a look at some Regency styles, or go a little smaller and consider making a little workbook for doll sizes. We shall see. So that's the plan. If you're interested in making your own bonnet, please hop over to my Etsy shop and you'll see Straw Bonnet Workbook. It's available. I put it up last night. Today is Thursday, so it went up Wednesday late. And I've already had a few purchased, and there's a review already. So thank you to the person that did the review, and of course, thank you to those of you who already purchased. All right, thank you all. Bye-bye.